There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going.
I spoke to her earlier and began by asking her what part of the EU has mentally and physically enslaved us, just as slave owners once did to their captives.
Well, now, first of all, that's presuming rather a lot. I talked about three things, just three examples. I talked about slavery, I talked about colonies revolting against empires, I talked about the peasants revolting against the feudal barons. And anybody could see that that was three examples of my basic thesis, which was that if people are oppressed, eventually they rebel. And that is what we did in 2016. We rebelled. And I do believe we've been oppressed, and as much as we haven't been free to make our own laws or to control our own borders, or even to be governed freely by our own elected government, because we're subject always to the overriding nature of EU law.
But the word oppressed and using the word slave is so laden. You surely know that as a former parliamentarian, that words carry such meaning.
Frankly, if I said good morning, people would interpret that adversely. They'd say Ann Widdecombe's insensitive because it's not a good morning for everybody. If people want to interpret what I've said in a particular way, that is not my responsibility. I said we'd been oppressed. I stand by that.
It is total white privilege on your part to use the word oppression in such a easy, cavalier manner. You're playing to the gallery.
I know that you're bright enough to understand an argument. The argument was there is a pattern throughout history which shows that if you oppress people for long enough and hard enough, they eventually rebel. The comparison is between oppressors and the oppressed throughout history in different ways, I didn't just restrict it to slavery. Now, it's up to you. If we can go round and round and round in circles, I was talking about oppression. I stand by what I said. If you want to melodramatically interpret it, that is up to you. I can do no more than stand by the speech I made, which was only 90 seconds long, so everybody can rerun it and watch it.
How can you use the comparison to slaves and oppression and sit there and expect people to take you seriously? Yes, you had two other examples. I do understand a metaphor. I do understand comparison. But you know the power of words.
What I don't understand is how you can sit there and say perfectly intelligently that you understand I wasn't making a direct comparison, and then talk as if I were. I am not responsible for how people choose to interpret what I say. The real scandal is that 3 years after that referendum, no progress has been made on leaving. That is where the real scandal lies. That is what I am talking about in the European Parliament. I desperately want Britain to be free of the European shackles, and now complain about that if you want to as well.
Slaves never got paid £3,900 a month, did they?
Certainly not. What's that got to do with it? Nor did the peasants. I am paid for working in the European Parliament, for representing constituents, which I've been doing today. I am paid for that. And I have not compared the European Parliament with slavery. The comparison is, throughout history, the oppressed rebelling against the oppressors. The oppressed are the British people, not the MEPs. We merely speak for them.
But you have compared the European Union to the oppressor, and you are now in the European Parliament in receipt of payment. You don't seem very oppressed to people sitting at home looking at you.
I didn't claim to be oppressed. I claimed that Britain, in that she cannot make her own laws and control her own borders and control her own trade deals, that Britain is subject to oppressive law from the EU. I didn't say I personally am oppressed. Although actually I do feel that when I can't rely on my own government to govern, but have to look to some supranational body, I do feel that's oppressive. But trying to say that I say I'm oppressed and then using my salary as a counter, this is becoming a silly argument.
You talk about representing your constituents. Do you think your constituents will be proud to be represented by someone who has invoked oppression falsely and invoked and damned, really, the memories of slaves today, however powerful you think that sort of analogy is?
I have not damned any memory of slaves. I have not made a direct comparison. Those were three illustrative examples through history of how people can turn on those who are oppressing them. And as for what my constituents think, I have got loads of congratulatory emails today, loads of them.
Ann Widdecombe, thank you very much for your time.